A nation and world rejoice as the 20 remaining living hostages are now back in Israel. Is Trump really the peace president? And what does Hamas have up their sleeve? Stay tuned for all this and more in this week's edition of Israel Matters. I'm your host, Stephen Briggs. Well, All Israel News reports after 738 days in captivity, the last 20 living hostages returned home on Monday after being released from the Gaza Strip by their captors from the terror organization Hamas. The release coincided with roughly 6-hour-long visit to Israel by US President Donald Trump, whose mediation had brought about the breakthrough in the negotiations. In his speech to the Knesset, Trump said, "It feels so good to say that the hostages are now back home." The hostages were released in 2 batches, the first including 7 hostages from Gaza City around 8 a.m. local time, and a second with 13 hostages from the southern city of Khan Yunis around 11:40. With their release, Hamas relinquished the last living hostages from captivity 738 days after terrorists kidnapped them from southern Israel during Hamas's October 7, 2023 invasion and massacre. As per the ceasefire terms, Hamas did not conduct any public ceremonies upon the release on Monday. However, it is not yet known whether Hamas filmed the release to use the footage in propaganda materials later. The hostages were handed over to representatives of the Red Cross, who then took them to forward positions of the Israel Defense Forces in the Gaza Strip. From there, they were transported to the IDF base in Re'im, where they met their immediate family. Their medical conditions was reported to be decent given the circumstances. They were all able to walk on their own feet and were visibly elated to embrace their family. After initial medical exams, helicopters of the Israel Air Force took them to hospitals for further exams and meetings with more friends and family. Israel fulfilled its obligations, releasing almost 2,000 Palestinian prisoners in exchange for the release of the Israeli hostages. They included 250 convicted terrorists serving one or multiple life sentences, and 1,718 Gazans that the IDF had detained over the duration of the 2-year war. Palestinian media said that 88 of the prisoners will be released to Judea and Samaria or East Jerusalem, while the rest will be deported to the Gaza Strip or abroad. However, contrary to the agreement, Hamas announced it would only release 4 bodies of hostages on Monday, and under the terms of the deal, the terror group would have had to release all hostages, living and dead, until Monday noon. Now that is obviously a breach on day 1 of the hostage deal. In this moment of joy and relief for the people of Israel, as our sons return home from captivity, we have not for a single moment forgotten the grieving families whose loved ones have not yet come back, declared President Isaac Herzog. We will not rest, and we will not be silent until we fulfill our sacred moral, Jewish, and human duty to bring every one of our hostages home, all of them, until every doubt is lifted and every family finds peace and closure, he said. Earlier, Herzog had welcomed home the former hostage Alon Ohel in a video call. "The piano at the president's residence is waiting for you," he told the pianist. "Alon, on behalf of all the people of Israel, on behalf of the entire state of Israel, we were so worried about you and we are so happy and overjoyed." But the former hostages, Segev, Kalfon, brothers David and Ariel Cuneo, as well as Avinatan Or, footage released by the IDF, was the first time they were seen in public since being kidnapped 2 years ago. Unlike most of the other hostages, their captors had not published any footage of them since their kidnapping. The Cooperstein family thanked God, Prime Minister Netanyahu, and US President Donald Trump, as well as the beautiful people of Israel, for the return of their son Bar. 2 years of an impossible journey. 2 years in which we did everything we could to make sure everyone knew who Bar is, and now everyone will finally get to truly know him. We knew that Bar, too, was full of faith, courage, and strength. Thank God he survived the horrors. Now it's time for him and for us to heal. IDF spokesman Brigadier General Eli Deferin said in a statement that this moment belonged to the people of Israel and to all those who believe in humanity, as well as to the soldiers who fought with courage, to the families who waited in faith, and to the fallen whose sacrifice made this day possible. The IDF has kept its sacred promise to bring our people home, and we will not rest until the mission is complete. We are prepared for the return of all the fallen hostages and expect Hamas to abide by the terms of the agreement, said Defrin. On this night of Simchat Torah, when light returns after great darkness, we say together, welcome home. Today, the state of Israel stands taller. From the depths of our pain, we have shown the world that Israel does not forget its people. No man or woman is left behind. May their return bring strength to us all. How wonderful, friends, that Hostage Square in Tel Aviv has now been renamed as Freedom Square. The footage of the hugs and greetings and tears of joy and relief between the united families of freedom hostages is so incredibly beautiful and emotional. Here is a short montage from Stand With Us. What a moment. What a moment. What an incredible moment for each of those families and indeed the whole free world that these hostages were released. Psalm 126 verse 1 and 2 says, "When the Lord restored the captives of Zion, we were like those who dreamed. Our mouths were filled with laughter, our tongues with songs of joy. Then it was said among the nations, the Lord has done great things for them." And we say that today from the nations the Lord has indeed done great things for them, restoring the captives of Zion. Jeremiah 31 verse 16 and 17 is so pertinent too and was sent to us from an Israeli friend yesterday. This is what the Lord says: "Restrain your voice from weeping and your eyes from tears, for your work will be rewarded, declares the Lord. They will return from the land of the enemy, so there is hope for your descendants, declares the Lord. Your children will return to their own land." How beautifully does that describe the return of the hostages? Glory to God. Of course, there is sadness mixed with this joy. Families whose loved ones did not survive. All Israel News reports, contrary to the terms of the ceasefire, Hamas has only released 4 of the 28 remaining bodies of Israeli hostages in its possession on Monday. Under the agreement, the group was required to hand over all hostages, both living and dead, by noon today. On Tuesday morning, the IDF announced that the 4 bodies had been identified and that 2 of them were Israeli hostage Guy Iluz and the Nepalese citizen Bipin Joshi. The names of the other 2 bodies had not been cleared for release by their families at this time. Hamas had announced it intended to release the bodies of Yossi Sharabi and Daniel Peretz as well. The IDF received 4 caskets from the Red Cross in the Gaza Strip on Monday evening. They were taken to the Abu Kabir Forensic Institute in Tel Aviv for identification by the National Institute of Forensic Medicine in collaboration with the Israel Police and the military rabbinate. The Hostage Families Forum expressed its shock at receiving the information that only 4 of the hostage bodies would be released. The families of the hostages received with shock and deep dismay the news of the intention to return today only 4 bodies of fallen soldiers out of the 28 that Hamas is holding, the forum stated. This is a blatant violation of the agreement by Hamas. We expect the government of Israel and the mediating parties to act immediately to correct this terrible injustice. Later, on Tuesday, Israeli hostage Sar Gal Hirsch vowed, "We will continue and intensify pressure on Hamas until the return of the hostages has been completed." The issue was discussed yesterday in the talks between the Prime Minister and President Trump and was also expressed last night in Egyptian President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi's words. The issue is also being addressed with other international parties and continues in our actions. And that means those of the negotiating team with the mediators at this very moment, Sisi added. According to the Times of Israel, on Tuesday, Israel gave Hamas until the end of the day to make progress on the release of the other 24 bodies. While sources from the mediating countries argued that Hamas would be hard-pressed to locate all of the bodies across the devastated enclave, Can News reported that Israel believes Hamas has withheld some of the bodies it already retrieved. The writing was on the wall. But only now are we discussing in any significant way the options for response, an informed source told Can, adding that the deal signed by Israel didn't provide effective leverage to pressure Hamas on this issue. Haaretz cited an Arab diplomat from a mediating country who assured that the negotiators are working on the issue and that the overall ceasefire agreement is not in danger. Meanwhile, Yael Adar, the mother of slain hostage Tamir Adar, told Channel 12 News that the government betrayed the families of the murdered hostages, saying they told me that a live hostage is worth 100 Palestinian prisoners, including life termers. She continued, but a dead hostage is worth 15 Palestinian bodies. Why not 100 dead Palestinians? Adar argued that Hamas had not technically violated the agreement, claiming it was drafted without a firm deadline for the return of the bodies. The IDF reported that Iluz, whose body was returned on Monday, had been wounded when he was abducted by terrorists after fleeing the massacre at the Nova Music Festival in the Tel Gamma area. Guy died from his wounds after not receiving proper medical treatment while held captive by Hamas. He was 26 years old at his death, the IDF announced. Bipin Joshi, an agricultural student from Nepal, was 23 when he was kidnapped from a safety shelter on Kibbutz Alumim. It is assessed that he was murdered in captivity during the first months of the war, read the statement. The military vowed that the final conclusions regarding the circumstances of their deaths would be determined after the completion of the examination. The IDF and the Prisoners and Missing Persons Directorate of the State of Israel expressed their deep condolences to the families, continue to make every effort to return all the hostages, and are preparing for the continued implementation of the agreement. Hamas is required to fulfill its part of the agreement and make the necessary efforts to return all the hostages to their families and to proper burial. Our thoughts and prayers are with the families of all those who have lost loved ones during this conflict. May the God of all comfort surround you with his comfort. So the question remains, did Israel win? Many are wondering who actually won this war. America brokered a ceasefire, but was there an actual victor? Hamas was dancing in the streets and claiming victory several days ago, and sweets were being passed out on the streets of Gaza, which, as an aside, is a strange one to have on hand during a so-called famine. But Netanyahu is very confident that Israel has won this war in Gaza. The IDF chief said a couple of days ago, the military pressure we've exerted over the past 2 years, together with the complementary political move, constitutes a victory over Hamas. Certainly, Israel has accomplished so much in dismantling Iran's axis of evil, and we should thank the Lord for the many victories that he has granted over the last 2 years. Deuteronomy 20, verse 4 says, "For the Lord your God is he who goes with you to fight for you against your enemies to give you the victory." So many Israelis have suffered so much to get to this point. Sacrifices, not just for the good of their nation, but for the whole civilized world. I love that Trump, in his speech in the Knesset, gave thanks to the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, to the great applause of the Knesset. We must all keep our eyes on the Lord now as much or more so than ever. And Psalm 18, verse 31 to 32 reads, "The Lord alone is God. God alone is our defense. He is the God who strengthens me, who makes my pathway safe. May he give a safe pathway forward." We will definitely have to return to this topic in future episodes of Israel Matters. If Hamas is successfully demilitarized as they have promised to be, then that certainly constitutes a win. Trump is very sure of himself that he has brought peace to the Middle East. But time will tell, of course. To me, it seemed a big red flag to appoint Tony Blair to the so-called peace board, although thankfully, Trump mentioned to the press on the flight to Israel today that he is now uncertain whether Tony Blair will be accepted onto that peace board. Fox News reports that President Donald Trump celebrated peace in the Middle East after he signed the historic peace agreement that ended 2 years of fighting in Gaza. At long last, we have peace in the Middle East. And it's a very simple expression, peace in the Middle East, Trump said during remarks at Sharm el-Sheikh in Egypt, flanked by dozens of world leaders who flew in especially for the occasion. We've heard it for many years, but nobody thought it could ever get there, and now we're there. Now, according to Trump, mediators will begin work on phase 2, 3, and 4 of the 20-point peace plan. All the details of what governance of Gaza will look like and how Hamas will be demilitarized are definitely not sorted out yet. Stage 1 of the hostages being released was just that. Stage 1. We must still continue in prayer that God will guide the decision makers as they carve out the next stages of this plan. While there is definitely uncertainty over the next steps in the Gaza peace process, at that summit in Egypt yesterday, 4 world leaders signed a document on the war called the Trump Declaration for Enduring Peace and Prosperity. It was jointly signed by the US President Donald Trump, Egyptian President Abdul Fattah al-Sisi, Qatari Emir Tamim bin Hamad Al Thani, and Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan. Here's the full text of that document as released by the White House. We, the undersigned, welcome the truly historic commitment and implementation by all parties to the Trump peace agreement, ending more than 2 years of profound suffering and loss, opening a new chapter for the region defined by hope, security, and a shared vision for peace and prosperity. We support and stand behind President Trump's sincere efforts to end the war in Gaza and bring lasting peace to the Middle East. Together, so this is Qatar, this is Egypt, this is Turkey and the US. Together, we will implement this agreement in a manner that ensures peace, security, stability, and opportunity for all peoples of the region, including both Palestinians and Israelis. We understand that lasting peace will be one in which both Palestinians and Israelis can prosper with their fundamental human rights protected, their security guaranteed, and their dignity upheld. We affirm that meaningful progress emerges through cooperation and sustained dialogue, and that strengthening bonds among nations and peoples serves the enduring interests of regional and global peace and stability. We recognize the deep historical and spiritual significance of this region to the faith communities whose roots are intertwined with the land of the region, Christianity, Islam, and Judaism among them. Respect for these sacred connections and the protection of their heritage sites shall remain paramount in our commitment to peaceful coexistence. We are united in our determination to dismantle extremism and radicalization in all its forms. No society can flourish when violence and racism is normalized, or when radical ideologies threaten the fabric of civil life. We commit to addressing the conditions that enable extremism and to promoting education, opportunity, and mutual respect as foundations for lasting peace. We hereby commit to the resolution of future disputes through diplomatic engagement and negotiation rather than through force or protracted conflict. We acknowledge that the Middle East cannot endure a persistent cycle of prolonged warfare, stalled negotiations, or the fragmentary, incomplete, or selective application of successfully negotiated terms. The tragedies witnessed over the past 2 years must serve as an urgent reminder that future generations deserve better than the failures of the past. We seek tolerance, dignity, and equal opportunity for every person, ensuring this region is a place where all can pursue their aspirations in peace, security, and economic prosperity, regardless of race, faith, or ethnicity. We pursue a comprehensive vision of peace, security, and shared prosperity in the region, grounded in the principles of mutual respect and shared destiny. In this spirit, we welcome the progress achieved in establishing comprehensive, endurable peace arrangements in the Gaza Strip, as well as the friendly and mutually beneficial relationship between Israel and its regional neighbors. We pledge to work collectively to implement and sustain this legacy, building institutional foundations upon which future generations may thrive together in peace. We commit ourselves to a future of enduring peace. End quote. Note that there is no statement concerning a Palestinian state, and it's interesting who signed it and who didn't in light of those in attendance. What will the outcome of this document be? Only time will tell. Meanwhile, in Gaza, will Hamas hold up the end of their bargain? This is a key question. The J-Post reported yesterday that Hamas has sought to reassert itself in Gaza since a ceasefire took hold, killing at least 32 people in a crackdown on groups that have pushed back against their tight grip on the enclave. Overnight in Gaza City, Hamas shot dead in cold blood 8 individuals in the public square as they began to seek to re-secure their control over Gaza, all while there was many witnesses shouting Allahu Akbar. Greatly weakened by the IDF during the war, Hamas has gradually sent members back into the streets of Gaza since the ceasefire began on Friday, moving cautiously in case it suddenly collapses, according to 2 security sources in the territory. Trump's plan foresees Hamas out of power in a demilitarized Gaza run by a Palestinian committee under international supervision. It calls for the deployment of an international stabilization mission that will train and support a Palestinian police force. But Trump, speaking on his way to the Middle East, suggested Hamas had been given a temporary green light to police Gaza. They do want to stop the problems, and they've been open about it, and we gave them approval for a period of time, he said, responding to a journalist's question about it. About reports that Hamas was shooting rivals and instituting itself as a police force. After the ceasefire took effect, Ismail al-Thawabta, head of Hamas's Gaza government media office, told Reuters the group would not allow a security vacuum and it would maintain public safety and property. Hamas has ruled out any discussion of its arsenal, saying it would be ready to surrender its arms to a future Palestinian state. The group has said it seeks no role in Gaza's future governing body, but that this should be agreed upon by Palestinians with no foreign control. Now, let's listen to a short clip from Ben Shapiro of the Daily Wire, who was there at the Knesset for Trump's historic speech. His assessment was that Trump's approval rating in Israel this week is at 197%. President Trump received 22 standing ovations during his speech in the Knesset today. Let's watch this clip now.
The president also laid out what comes next, and that is not just the return of hostages, but a fully disarmed Hamas and a demilitarized Gaza. How that happens is still up in the air. Right? Phase 1 has been solved, but if the president does what he has pledged to do and applies pressure to all of the erstwhile Arab allies and Muslim allies of Hamas, then Hamas will have very few choices left. Again, there have been ongoing firefights over the course of the last few days inside the Gaza Strip between Hamas and other tribes attempting to gain control. Several dozen people have been killed already by Hamas. So this is going to be an effort. But the president said that he intends to ensure that the commitments that he made and that the international community made are kept, and that Hamas is disarmed and Gaza demilitarized.
This long and difficult war has now ended. You know, some people say 3,000 years, some people say 500 years, whatever it is. It's the granddaddy of them all. And in an unprecedented achievement, virtually the entire region has endorsed the plan that Gaza will be immediately demilitarized, that Hamas will be disarmed, and Israel's security will no longer be threatened in any way, shape, or form.
And with that done, the president also talked about what he hoped would come next, and that was a golden age for Israel, a golden age in the Middle East, peace breaking out all over. And that is the hope. The president of the United States got it done in his first term with Morocco, with UAE, with Bahrain. And the president intends to now expand that out to include places like Syria, like Saudi Arabia, like Indonesia.
We also convey my tremendous appreciation for all of the nations of the Arab and Muslim world that came together to press Hamas to set the hostages free and to send them home. We had a lot of help. We had a lot of help from a lot of people that you wouldn't suspect. And I want to thank them very much for that. It's an incredible triumph for Israel and the world to have all of these nations working together as partners in peace. And it's pretty unusual for you to see that, but it happened in this case. This was a very unusual point in time, a brilliant point in time. Generations from now, this will be remembered as the moment that everything began to change, and change very much for the better. Like the USA right now, it will be the golden age of Israel and the golden age of the Middle East. It's going to work together.
And so here, that's just a short clip of a long speech that he had in the Knesset. He pointed out an important truth in his speech, that it doesn't go well for the nations that attack Israel, a biblical principle that goes all the way back to Genesis 12:3. If you've not seen our documentary films yet that explore this biblical principle and the pattern of it throughout history, please find the links to the Blessing, Curse, or Coincidence film series by Hatikva Film Trust in the description for this episode below, including Abraham's Vision, Jacob's Tears, Cyrus Nations UK, and America and the Israel Effect. All 4 films are available as documentaries digitally as well as DVD. And they also have been being turned into a podcast series called the Blessing, Curse, or Coincidence podcast, which if you haven't listened to any of that, then please go and visit that. It's a playlist on YouTube as well as on Spotify and Apple Podcasts and all of the major podcast platforms. And I want to turn our attention to today, finally, for a Hebrew word study section, being that it's Simchat Torah. I wanted to look at the word joy, simcha in Hebrew. Simchat Torah means rejoicing of the Torah. It's a joyful Jewish holiday that marks the completion of the annual Torah reading cycle and the immediate start of a new one. Celebrated with singing, dancing, and processions in synagogues, it symbolizes the love and continuity of enjoying God's life-giving instructions found in the Torah. On October 7th, 2023, Simchat Torah coincided with a devastating surprise attack by Hamas on Israel. The massacre deeply impacted Jewish communities worldwide as a day meant for celebration became one of profound mourning. Since then, many have observed Simchat Torah with both joy and solemn remembrance. I am so pleased that now Simchat Torah can also be remembered as the day the 20 final living hostages were returned. In Isaiah 24, we read about a joyless world. Verse 11 says, "In the streets they cry out for wine. All joy turns to gloom. All joyful sounds are banished from the earth." It's a picture of desolation, people looking for comfort and finding none. It's not unlike the grief and heaviness that can settle over our lives when we experience loss, trauma, or fear. As the people of Israel were restored by God after they walked through exile and captivity, He also restores us. He is a God who restores and redeems. And this past week, we saw a powerful image of that restoration when 20 Israeli hostages held in captivity by Hamas for nearly 2 years were rescued and brought back home. After long nights, silence, and separation, they were returned to joy. Images of families reunited, of tears and laughter mingled, echo the very heartbeat of Scripture. God is in the business of bringing his people back from exile, or one could say, from sorrow to joy. And so today, we reflect on this unshakable truth from Nehemiah 8:10. Do not grieve, for the joy of the Lord is your strength. Let's begin with where true joy, true simcha, is found. Joy is found in God's presence. Psalm 16 verse 11 tells us, "You make known to me the path of life, and you will fill me with joy in your presence, with eternal pleasures at your right hand." True joy, friends, doesn't come from circumstances. It comes from being near to God. And that's why the people rejoiced when the temple was rebuilt in Jerusalem. Even those who remembered the first temple and wept could still sense God drawing near. In Nehemiah 12, verse 43, we read, "On that day they offered great sacrifices, rejoicing because God had given them great joy." The sound of rejoicing in Jerusalem could be heard far away. And isn't that what we witnessed in Israel this week? The sound of rejoicing could be heard far away, indeed across the world. We saw the kind of joy that comes when people are brought from darkness into light, and that is the joy God promises his people. Joy will be everlasting. Isaiah 35 verse 10 says, "Gladness and joy will overtake them, and sorrow and sighing will flee away." What a promise. The joy of the Lord is not temporary. It doesn't depend on news headlines, income levels, or perfect circumstances. It is rooted in the eternal. It's the kind of joy that the ransomed will walk in as they return to Zion, not just momentary happiness, but everlasting joy on their heads. So friends, let's look at some places where joy can be found. Joy is restored through forgiveness. King David, after deep failure, prayed, "Restore to me the joy of your salvation and grant me a willing spirit to sustain me." That's Psalm 51, verse 12. Maybe you feel distant from joy today because of regret or guilt, but hear this: God is not finished with you. He can restore what sin or shame has tried to steal. His mercy reaches further than your mistakes. Joy returns when we return to the Word. In Nehemiah 8, the people of Israel wept when they heard the law being read aloud. But Nehemiah told them not to mourn, for the joy of the Lord is your strength. That's Nehemiah 8, verse 10. When we engage with God's Word, really read it and understand it, our hearts are stirred, not just with truth, but with joy. Scripture is not just information. It's invitation. It invites us back into a relationship with our Maker. Joy in the midst of sorrow is possible. And Ezra 3, verse 13 tells us that when the temple foundation was laid, the people shouted for joy while others wept aloud. No one could distinguish the sounds of the shouts of joy from the sound of weeping. Sometimes, friends, life feels like that, a mixture of emotions. Even the celebration of the hostages' return was tempered by grief for those still missing, for lives lost, for years gone. But joy and sorrow can exist side by side. And in God's presence, joy ultimately wins. We know the end of the story. So don't settle for fleeting joy. Jonah was thrilled when God gave him shade through a plant, but when it withered, so did his joy. Jonah was very happy about the plant in Jonah 4, verse 6. But the next day he was so miserable he wanted to die. That's what happens when we build our joy on temporary things. Comforts, pleasures, material gain, they fade. But the joy that comes from God doesn't fade. it deepens, it strengthens, and it sustains. Another Hebrew verse with the word simcha, joy or gladness, which is so remarkably relevant to the joy so many are experiencing this week with the return of the hostages at the end of Sukkot, the Feast of Tabernacles of Booths, is found in Nehemiah 8 verse 17, which says, "So the whole assembly of those who had returned from the captivity made booths, Sukkot, and sat under the booths. For since the days of Joshua," and spelled here exactly as Jesus' name in Hebrew, Yeshua, "since the days of Yeshua the son of Nun, until that day the children of Israel had not done so, and there was very great gladness." And here this week the captives were brought back from their captivities in time for the end of Sukkot. God is so good, and his word is so amazing. And here is good news that brings us great joy. The word became flesh and brought joy. Yeshua, the word made flesh, Jesus, the word made flesh, came to bring light and life. "These things I have spoken to you," he said, "so that my joy may be in you and that your joy may be complete." That's John 15, verse 11. That's the goal, friends. Not partial, fragile joy, but complete, overflowing, enduring joy. Through the Messiah, we are no longer captives. Like the hostages who were physically set free, God also desires to set people free spiritually, ransomed, rescued, and brought into a joy-filled future. This is the joy we look forward to. Psalm 100, verse 2, calls us to worship the Lord with gladness, come before him with joyful songs or joy-filled songs. One day we will enter his gates with thanksgiving and his courts with praise, not just for what he's done, but for who he is. He is the God who brings captives home. He's the God who restores what was lost, the God who makes all things new. And so we say it again, not as a suggestion, but as a declaration of faith. The joy of the Lord is your strength. Let that joy carry you. Let it heal you. Let it lead you home. Let's rejoice this week with those who rejoice. Weep with those who weep. But rejoice is what this week is all about. And here's another emotional video from Living L'chaim of a son reunited with his father yesterday that sums up that joy so well.
Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad, Baruch Ata Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, שהחיינו וקיימנו והגיענו לזמן הזה. אתם חיים שלי, האור שלי, הלב שלי, נשמות שלי, שנתיים, יום יום. חיים שלי בקורונה אליך, הלב שלי, חזר לי החיים, את האנשים שהביאו את תודה.
I would love to hear your thoughts in the comments on today's show. What joy you have experienced in recent days, even today, how you've celebrated this the hostage release. Take a moment to like, subscribe, and share below. It does help us get the message of Israel Matters out further and wider. Let's stand together and use our voice and influence to combat anti-Semitism and to point people to the Lord and to his word. Israel Matters is a listener-supported show. It matters to God, and therefore it should matter to us. So if you'd like to make it possible for us to continue making content like this, please consider supporting us. Gifts in the USA are even tax-deductible. You can find the info and how to donate in the show notes below. Thank you for joining today. Thank you for listening. Let's pursue the Lord and his truth together, and indeed his joy, for the joy of the Lord is our strength. I'm Stephen Briggs, and this is Israel Matters.